Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from the National AIM Center at CAST. My name is Luis Perez. I'm going to be your moderator for today. Before we get started with the webinar, there are just a few housekeeping items to take care of. First of all, know that we are recording this webinar. The recording will be closed captioned, and then we will post it on the same page where you registered for the webinar. That's the event page for the webinar. There is material available for download for you, and Leslie is going to share the link to that digital handout for this session in the chat. But just in case, I'll read it out loud. It is bit.ly/AEM webinar and then -SM for social media. The webinar is being closed captioned today. In the Zoom interface, there is a closed caption button. And once you select that button, you're going to be able to see the live captions. I want to thank our captioner for today, Mike, for providing those captions. It's a great support that we make available during our webinars. Next slide, Mindy. And we invite you to share your thoughts, your insights, and as well as your questions in the chat, using the chat feature of the Zoom interface. So you will open up the chat panel, and there is just one more thing you have to do once you access the chat. You want to make sure that you select all panelists and attendees from the drop-down option. That way, everybody will be able to see your excellent comments and your questions. And of course, this is a webinar on social media, so we would love for you to reach out to the AIM Center and share any insights, anything new that you learned from today. You can tag us. We are at AEM_center. And you can also use the hashtag AEM, the number 4, and then all, ALL. Next slide, Mindy. And so we've already been having some interaction in the chat prior to the start of the recording. But let's just take a second and have you all introduce yourselves. Just share with us what your role is, where you're located. And then if there's a learning goal that you have for this webinar or a question or concern that brought you here, feel free to share that as well. So I'll just give you, a few seconds to do that. And then if we could move on to the next slide, Mindy. All right, so with those housekeeping details out of the way, again, a reminder that this is being recorded and we'll share the recording on our website in the event page. With the housekeeping out of the way, it is my great pleasure to welcome our presenter for today. She's Mindy Johnson, a great friend of mine and also a colleague at the AIM Center and at CAST. She's the Director of Digital Communications and Outreach at CAST. So she's really well positioned to talk about social media, and I can't imagine anybody else who would be better to lead us through this topic today. So Mindy, I'll turn it over to you.
You are much too kind, my friend. I hope I can live up to the expectations. Hi, everybody. I am Mindy Johnson, like Luis said, and I'm really excited to be talking about accessible social media with all of you today. As Luis mentioned, I'm the Director of Digital Communications and Outreach for CAST. So that means anytime you see a social media post from CAST or the AIM Center or the UDL Center or UDL on campus, it's probably from me. So I have many personalities that I keep under control. I run over 40 social media accounts and 4 are for myself. And I'm really excited to see a bunch of people who also run social media accounts for organizations here. So that's fantastic. So these best practices work for anything. If you're just doing this on your own or you're working for an organization, all of it's good practice to keep trying and doing better. So yes, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited. So this is a quote from Stella Young, who's a disability rights activist. She was Australian, passed away a couple years ago. But she says, "My disability exists not because I use a wheelchair, but because the broader environment isn't accessible." So one of the reasons why I like to start with this quote is that it's not social media necessarily that's so when on the next slide, I'm going to show you that this is a results of the WebAIM screen reader user survey from 2019. They do it every couple years, so this is an update. And as you can see from screen reader users, it's somewhat accessible, so they consider social media somewhat accessible, but about a little over a quarter don't know or think that it's either somewhat or very inaccessible. And that's not necessarily the fault of the tools themselves, it's probably the fault of the content owners. So people who are posting on these social media platforms like us, because it's our responsibility to make these things accessible. And Stella really brings home the point that it's not her wheelchair that's disabling, it's actually the environment that disables her. So I think I always like to start with something like that because it sort of frames things in a different light, as we like to do here at CAST and the AIM Center. But I'm wondering, does this surprise anybody in the audience? Do these results that actually there's an increase in people who think that it's very accessible or somewhat accessible over the survey from 2016. I think it went up a couple of percentage points, which is always great news because there are a lot of social media platforms out there that are paying much more attention to accessibility, which is fantastic. And we'll talk about those in just a couple minutes. I also like to say that even though I'm going to talk about some specific platforms like Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram, all of these principles actually apply to any place that you're posting social media, whether it's a video or an image or a link to something. You're participating in a Twitter conversation, you're part of a group on LinkedIn, all of these principles actually apply to any social media platform that you choose. So even though the examples may be of one social media platform or another, the principles themselves actually apply everywhere. And these are the principles that I'm going to be talking about. So these are the best practices that I have gathered over my probably 8-9 years doing this for CAST on social media. So we're going to talk about plain language. We're going to talk about Camel Case hashtags, image descriptions, captioning and audio, and link shorteners. And this is an update to a graphic I did in 2016. I actually updated the captioning and audio. It used to just say closed captioning for videos. And I updated that to include audio descriptions, and I'll talk a little bit about why I did that. But it just goes to show that it's, everything is always changing. This isn't a static. Social media is, platforms can come and go. Depending on the day, really, or depending on the flavor of the month. Yeah, and you can please feel free to use this image, share this image. I've licensed it Creative Commons. It's right on the digital handout. I even wrote out the image description so you can use that, so you don't even have to write that yourself. So this is all good stuff to share with everyone. But we'll go over each one of these so you know exactly what they mean by the end of this webinar. And feel free to ask questions in the chat box, by the way. I'm happy to answer those as we go along. And Luis is there too, and he's even though he said I'm the expert, he's an expert in accessible social media as well. All right, so let's start with plain language. One of the pieces of accessibility that we often forget to mention is cognitive accessibility. And especially in education, we love our acronyms, right? We absolutely love them. This is an example of a sentence that I read that was on Twitter. It is imperative that our MTSS include UDL at all levels of instructional support. Now to us, that might make sense, right? We know what MTSS is, we know what UDL is, we know what levels of instructional support means in terms of MTSS. For somebody who may not understand those acronyms, those concepts, that jargon, it might not make much sense, right? And they'd have to look up MTSS. By that time, you're on Twitter, you scrolled past it, you haven't gotten the point. So I decided I took it upon myself to actually reframe this example as universal design for learning isn't just for students who struggle, it's for everyone. So I took UDL, I spelled it out. You now have 280 characters versus 140. So you have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of using characters. But it describes the concept that the first person was trying to get across in a different way, right? Basically what they were saying was that UDL should be for everyone. So instead of saying, instead of putting all the ed tech jargon or the educational jargon in that tweet or that post, you're gonna help more people understand your message if you use plain language, spelling out all of the acronyms, making sure that you're not using a lot of that edgy speak, as I like to say. So that's just one example. And there's a lot more resources on that digital handout on plain language and how to use it too. Absolutely. All right. So Camel Case. Camel Case hashtags Camel Case makes hashtags easier to read. So a lot of people ask me, what the heck is Camel Case, right? Well, Camel Case, if you think of Camel Case as humps on a camel, and the humps on the camel are actually the capital letters. And thank you, Jen, for your comment about my handouts. Camel Case hashtags so when people squish words together in hashtags and they don't capitalize the first words of the names, they're really hard to read. So for example, on the left-hand side, we have some non-Camel Case hashtags. We've got not Camel Case, the more you know, Follow Friday, UDL Chat, not so easy to read, A11Y, and Aim for All. The Camel Case hashtags are on the right. So as you can see, I capitalized each first letter of each word, even though they're squished together, way easier for our eyes to read. So even sighted people benefit from this little trick, this Camel Case trick. So the Camel Case is easier to read, the more you know is easier to read, Follow Friday is easier to read, UDL Chat is also easier to read. You know that UDL is an acronym rather than an oodle chat, right? That's how a screen reader would read it if we didn't capitalize those three letters. Super easy to read, A11Y or capital A11Y. I've seen it both ways. I've actually seen it with a capital Y as well. And just a little tip, A11Y is actually the official hashtag for accessibility. And it's kind of an inside, not joke, but it's an inside message. There are 11 characters between the A and the Y in the word accessibility, so they decided to create the hashtag A11Y as the accessibility hashtag. That was when we had much fewer characters in Twitter than we do now. And then also, I use the Aim for All example because there's a little bit of, whether you choose there's a little bit of choice here when it comes to creating these Camel Cases. So again, screen readers will actually identify the first letters if you capitalize them in a Camel Case hashtag. So that helps screen readers, but it also, like I said, helps your sighted readers as well. So AIM is an acronym, so I would capitalize that, then the letter 4, and then all, you can either capitalize it or not, depending on what you would like to do. It's the first letter of the next word, so you could capitalize it. I prefer, and this is just a personal choice, to after a number or another capital letter for the word, I usually don't capitalize it. Like with UDL Chat, I chose not to capitalize the C in chat. But it's just a personal preference. It gets read by a screen reader correctly. But that's a really easy tip for making your posts more accessible, is using those Camel Cases in your hashtags. Plus, it's fun to say Camel Case. All right, so this is an example from a tweet that I did, and I used Camel Case hashtags in my tweets. So it says, thank you to my fellow ISTE standards colleagues. I think I may need a new business card. So they were joking around with me that I was triggering everybody's thoughts. So they called me the thought triggerer, and so I made a hashtag thought triggerer favorite role, and I tagged ISTE Connects, which is now just ISTE. This was a couple years ago, but And of course, I added an image description to the image that I tagged there, but I'll show you about that in just a moment. But you can see it's much easier to read this string of hashtags with the camel cases versus whether I had just left them all lowercase or had them all capital case. You can actually see that ISTE standards is an acronym and a word rather than just a giant ISTE standards word. All right. Everybody hanging in there so far? Okay. Image descriptions. So images without descriptions are like an unfinished story to me. They give you half the story, but they leave people out. And when I first did this webinar, Twitter was the only social media platform that allowed image descriptions for the platform. And it had just come out, so it was brand new and it was only on their mobile applications. Well, I'm happy to tell you with the update of this webinar, there are many more options to putting image descriptions in your social media posts. So this is one interface. Actually, Crystal, I will get to that in just a moment about animated GIFs. Great question. So yeah, so the one thing about adding image descriptions to Twitter is that you have to turn it on. By default, it's off in your accessibility settings. So that's something that I wish Twitter would change, but we can't have everything we want, and baby steps towards the right direction. So this is good. So if you go to your settings from your face profile, either on your phone or on the web, then you go down on the left to accessibility, and then there's a tick box and it's by default, like I said, it's left empty. But if you tick it and then you save your changes, then you will then be prompted to write image descriptions every time you upload an image to Twitter. This is one of the newer interfaces, so I took a picture of that. And again, it's just in settings and privacy. You scroll down to accessibility, and then you tick the little box that says compose image descriptions. And like I said, oh, I'll have to go back and check that, that emojis accessibility. But while I'm on that topic, emojis are actually the only thing on Twitter that you don't have to describe. They come with their own image descriptions. So those are the only images on Twitter that you don't have to describe. And if you want to know what they will say when they're described, you can go to Emojipedia. So that might be a better link to send out there, Leslie. But once you have your image descriptions on, oh yes, thank you, Stephen. Neuronyms, or numeronyms is our acronyms with numbers, like A11Y. Yes, and Luis, you're absolutely right about putting too many emojis in a row. Nobody wants to hear, you know, clapping hands, clapping hands, clapping hands over and over and over again, read by a screen reader. So this was an image that I uploaded to Twitter. I said, I love quoting research Mark. He really gets UDL, hashtag UDL chat. And as you can see, right below the image, it says add description because I've already turned the image descriptions on. So I go ahead and I either tap or I click on that prompt that says add description. My image opens up larger so I can see it, so I can describe it well. And I just type my description right in that space. And you get more than 280 characters, I believe. I've never run out of room writing image descriptions on Twitter, and I've written some pretty long ones. I mean, the idea is to keep them short, but if there's a lot of text in an image, you want to make sure that you're describing all of that text, because all that text in this image cannot be read by a screen reader. So we want everybody to get the joke. So this is Research Mark Wahlberg. If you don't follow him on Twitter, he's pretty awesome with the statistics jokes. He says, I can work within the means, but I'd rather party with the outliers. Basically, it's this professor who posts photos of Mark Wahlberg and little memes about statistics. It's pretty darn cool, if you ask me. One of my favorite people to follow. And then you save it. And then as you can see, right where it said add description, you can see the very first part of your image description. So you know that, you know who is in the photo, or sorry, who is, what your description was, at least the beginning of it. So that is for Twitter. Instagram, it's pretty much just as easy. One of my goals when I make when I do presentations is I try to slip a photo of my dog into every presentation that I do. So if you ever see me presenting anywhere else, look for pictures of my dog. This is the first picture of my dog in this presentation. So this is my dog and his hippo, Henry. So I've uploaded this to Instagram. When I go to, you know, I choose my filter, I do whatever, I edit the photo however I want. When I'm ready to write my caption, I actually go down to advanced settings, which is right there on the bottom. It doesn't look like you can tap it, but you can. You tap advanced setting and then you scroll down and there's a space that says write alt text. So you go ahead and tap that and it gives you all the room that you want to write your image description. So, and it's that easy. You just save it and it goes back and you go right back to writing your post, and your description will be not visible to your followers, but people with screen readers will be able to access it. And if you forget to do it, you can go back and edit your so, and there's directions on how to do that in the digital handout. This is Facebook. This is picture of Elliot #2, my dog. So with Facebook, Facebook has introduced artificial intelligence that describes images for you. But I did this example because I wanted to show you how general the descriptions that Facebook produces are right now, at least. So this is a picture of my dog, Elliot, looking longingly at the basketball players behind our house. So you tap on the image or click on the image. Oops, sorry, I went backwards one. You tap or you click on the image and then you click on options, and the options menu comes up. And the third one down is change alt text. And what it will do is open up that top, open up the change alt text menu or pop-up. And it will say the automatically generated alternative text for this photo is dog. Well, I wanted to be a little bit more descriptive than dog. So I decided to override the generated alt text. And so I tapped that button, I clicked that button, and I changed it to Elliot the dog looking longingly at the kids playing basketball behind the house. And I thought that was a much better description of what I wanted people to know about what Elliot was looking at in this photo. And then I click save, and then it's ready for anybody using a screen reader to read my, to understand what the image was. Oh, that's a great question, Jen, about writing a photo of or illustration of, or that's actually yeah, so Luis is right. So it will say image. Most screen readers will say image, and then it will give you the text description. Unless it's important to for the user to understand the image better, I tend not to say photo of, unless it's important that it's a photo, right? So for example, I might say graph of, or I might say illustration of, if it's important for the person to understand that this is an illustration of a dog rather than a photo of a dog. If it's not important, if it's just the dog that's important, then you don't need to necessarily call out whether it's a photo or an illustration or a graphic or anything like that. But that's a great question. I've heard mixed feelings about whether to put it or not, or whether to add it or not. Some people hate it when they have to hear that a screen reader read all that. But again, if it's important to the meaning of the image that's there or the purpose of the image that's there, then I would add it. Great question. So somebody earlier, and I'm sorry I can't remember your name, asked about GIFs. So GIFs or GIFs, yes, Crystal, thank you. So GIFs are the only thing that cannot be described in social media using the alt text options. And that goes for Facebook and Twitter. I've never tried to post a GIF on Instagram, but I'm sure they have that. Anyway, what I like to do is to add that GIF description right to my tweet or right to my Facebook post. So you'll see here, I did a post after a UDL chat that I hosted, and then I put the image, the GIF description right in brackets right at the end. Yeah, so one of the reasons why you can't add image descriptions to a GIF is that a GIF is actually a series of images. So they're trying to figure out how to have you describe the file, but for now you just have to put it in the post itself. And that really goes for any of the other social media platforms that don't have any alternatives for adding alt text to your images. So for example, LinkedIn does not allow for image descriptions yet. So if you're posting on LinkedIn, you may want to include the image description right in your post. And that's a great question, Sabrina, about was there a particular reason why I chose brackets instead of parentheses? I chose brackets because it wouldn't, it doesn't interrupt the flow of my tweet. So for example, if I were to have parentheses somewhere else in my tweet, I wouldn't want people to confuse that with the content of my tweet with the description of my image. But that's it. Again, it's just a personal choice. Visually, I just like putting them at the end and in brackets, just to remind. I usually put metadata about my tweets, and I'll talk about that in actually just a minute, in brackets. And yes, Luis, be careful with blinking GIFs. It can cause seizures. So we want to be careful to not put really bright, flashy GIFs because they can be dangerous for people. But this is a nice calm one with Mr. Peanut. And Crystal, sure, you can put it in a following tweet, but I'd rather you put it right in the tweet that contains the GIF, because the person who is following you may not necessarily click on the next tweet to see what you said. So good practice if you don't have room, though. So like I said in the beginning, I used to have this section as just captioning for videos, and I changed it to captioning, to closed captioning and audio descriptions, and that's thanks to Natalie Shaheen, who's a researcher in Maryland, a friend of a friend, actually. And she is visually impaired, and she said, you know, audio descriptions are really helpful when it comes to videos. So I absolutely agreed. So I changed my whole section on video accessibility to include that. So, but first we're going to start with captions. So when I post a video, it's got to be a really good reason for me to post it if it doesn't have captions. So for example, but a lot of people, what they do is they use the auto captions, which is great, right? Auto captioning is fantastic, and I'll actually show you how it can even help you write your own closed captions for your videos. But for example, this says, left, hello everybody, carry flavor it's. That's not actually what the person said. It's actually, hello again, everybody, Harry Carey in Cleveland. And this was, so I'm sure you've seen many examples of captioning fails out there. I'm sure our captionist today has some examples of captioning fails as well that he can reference, but they can be pretty funny, but they're pretty frustrating when you're the person that needs to rely on those captions. So it's always good to not just rely on automatic captions for your videos. So one of the ways that you can actually caption your videos is you can use the automatic captions and you can edit those so that you can start with something rather than doing your captions from a transcript or from scratch. So YouTube allows you to go right in and edit that text right away and make sure that there's no nonsense or everything makes sense. You can even identify speakers if there are multiple speakers in your video, because that's what closed captions are. They're not just transcripts of your video. They're not just subtitles of your video. They actually can describe the non-vocal noises that happen in your video and identify speakers as well. So everybody can benefit from that information. And there's a great webinar on how to caption your videos from the AIM Center, and a whole module from the new teacher module from the AIM Center as well that shows you how to caption your videos. Facebook actually also allows you to upload SRT files, which are subrit transcripts, to your videos, so you can caption your videos in Facebook. You can actually now add captions to your videos in LinkedIn, and you can add captions to your videos in Twitter as well. So this is fantastic news for captions in videos. And thank you for adding all those great support links. So the other thing that I do, and this goes back to one of the questions that somebody raised earlier on about me putting the GIF description in brackets. So this is a tweet from 3Play Media, and they, before you even click the link, you know it's a video because they put video in the brackets before the link. So I like that little, it's just a nice thing to do for your users so they know that when they're clicking that link, it's going to take them to a video. So why you have a responsibility to make your video accessible. That's a great webinar, by the way, by 3Play Media. All right. Okay, so audio description. And I am going I made one mistake. I need to stop sharing for just a moment because I need to share again with my full sound. All right. So this is an example of an audio description. And these videos are very short. Again, they're from Disney, but Disney does some really nice audio descriptions. So audio descriptions are basically, so if you can't see the video and you can't know what's going on in the video, if there's no dialogue going on, the video doesn't make a whole lot of sense to somebody who can't actually access the visuals on the video. So I'm going to show you an example of this. So hopefully you can all see this. This is, again, a Disney Frozen trailer, and I'll just show a couple of seconds of it, just so you get the idea.
Ooh, hello.
So imagine you're watching this and you can't actually see the Stop that for now. You get the idea. It's basically a bunch of vocalizations and music playing in the background. So for somebody who can't see that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They don't get the joke, right? This is an example of the same trailer, but with audio descriptions. So the Disney Corporation went in and they hired somebody to do a description of the action that's happening in the video. Now I do have to warn you that one of the problems with this video is that they did not caption their audio descriptions. So this is auto caption. So you'll see a couple of not quite great captions here. But it's just to make a point that that audio descriptions can enhance a video too.
From the creators of Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph, Disney. A carrot-nosed, coal-eyed snowman shuffles up to a purple flower peeping out of deep snow.
Ooh, hello.
He takes a deep sniff. His nose lands on a frozen pond. A reindeer looks up and pants like a dog. Seeing the reindeer slip on the ice, the snowman smiles and moves towards him, though actually he's running on the spot. The reindeer falls on his chin. The snowman uses his arm as a crutch. The reindeer paddles his front legs. Head over heels, the snowman crawls along the ice. The reindeer does the breaststroke. The snowman rolls his body, but flips onto his back. The reindeer's tongue sticks to the ice. The snowman held his head. Twig arm and reindeer lips tug at the carrot. The carrot flies off and lands in soft snow. The reindeer goes after it with Snowman and his body parts hanging on his tail. The snowman puts himself back together again and glumly contemplates his noseless state. The reindeer jams the carrot back in place and pants like a proud puppy. The snowman pats him with his stick-thin arm, then goes to sneeze. He grabs his nose with both hands. His head shoots off. Frozen, coming this winter in 3D.
So that's one of my favorite examples of audio descriptions for video. And actually, this is one of the examples, one of the reasons I love this example so much, and I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment, just so you don't have to hear all the sounds that my computer is making while I share the video. But one of the reasons why I love that example so much is because the audio descriptions actually enhance the experience of watching that little clip. They've done the audio description with a lot of humor. And John, I did see your question about if you share an image from one social media platform to the other, does the alt text go with it? And I do not believe it does, unless you actually share the entire original post. So yes, audio descriptions helps with multitasking too. You can go wash the dishes and watch a movie and know exactly what happened when you're washing the dishes. But yeah, so if you take the image itself, the alt text will not follow the image, but it will follow the post. So if you share the original post and the original post has an image description, then it will actually follow with it. But it has to be the post. It doesn't actually follow the image itself, but that's a great question. So if you're reposting an image from one social media platform to another or one account to another, make sure you're sharing the whole post if it has an image description, or maybe even add that image description to your, as a comment to your reposting of it. All right, so audio description is important, right? And basically, but audio description is also really difficult to do well. But if you think about it, if you think about your videos from the start and think, will my audience be able to understand this part of my video if they can't actually see it? So when you plan from the start, as we know with UDL, when you plan for the start for thinking about accessibility and access and your goals and your content from the very, very start, it's going to make it better for everyone. So thinking about that right from the get-go, leaving room for captions, that's one of the most common mistakes that video producers often make in creating these videos, is that they put a whole bunch of text down in the lower third of the video where the captions actually go. So it covers up the name of somebody or the place where they are, or even some important text that goes along with the video. So it's important to think about the accessibility of your videos from the very start as you're creating them. And unfortunately, you can't add captions to other people's videos. Sometimes they'll let you. But what you can do is ask the person, say, hey, I love this video. I really want to be able to share it, but I can't because it doesn't have captions and I want all of my subscribers to be able to enjoy it as well. Would you mind adding Captions. It's really easy. Here's some resources, or I can even help you if you want. And it's a great way to start a conversation. Think of it as a challenge rather than a, oh man, they didn't caption their video. And does audio description compete with captions for available screen space? So audio description doesn't actually, it's not actually captions. So those were captions of audio descriptions. Audio description can be done in different ways. So there's two ways that I know of. One is like this video. It just used the white space between vocalizations to be able to describe the action or the between dialogue. The other way I've seen it done is that the video actually pauses for the audio description, and then the dialogue continues after that. So there's different ways to do audio description, but it is part of 508 compliance and accessibility. So it's something to consider when you're thinking about your videos, especially with the popularity of the videos that I see now. A lot of the time, it's like a bunch of text across the screen and over music. And that's not helpful at all, right? If somebody can't see that, all they're hearing is the music. Yeah, it's important to think about everyone when you're thinking of your videos. One way that I've done, not audio descriptions, but sort of an in-between, I wouldn't recommend this as like, yes, this is absolutely accessible, but it's better than nothing. I've actually put a description in the description on YouTube of what any piece of the video that is visual and not actually described within the video itself. So that's another thing you can do. I'm looking for here we go. All right, we're on to the last one, link shorteners. So not only do link shorteners save you characters, they actually help save people's ears. So links are often these giant, long, just character number nonsense, right? Or at least there's pieces of them that are, even if some of the URL makes sense. But what a link shortener does is first of all, you can actually, with some of the link shorteners out there, like Bitly, you can actually customize the link. So it does have some meaningful text that's in it. So for example, the Bitly link that's on the bottom of this slide right here, bit.ly/aim/social media, that's a customized link that's shortened. So you don't have to read the entire long Google Doc link. And if you're using a screen reader, it's even kinder because they don't have to listen to all the gobbledygook that's in the link itself. So there are a lot of link shorteners out there. Twitter actually will do this for you automatically. Twitter has its own link shortener that will just do it automatically, like I said. I like to use Bitly because it gives me data back on how many clicks people have done, where they clicked from. Did they do it from Twitter? Did they do it from Facebook? So this is really handy for me as when I run the social media accounts, just so I know what content is really speaking to people. So it's another nice benefit of using link shorteners. There's tinyurl, there's Owly, which is the Hootsuite's link shortening service, if you use a social media platform like that. Is Bitly accessible? That is a great question. You mean the Bitly site? Not sure.
I think there were actually two questions.
Oh.
So that's actually a great example. Somebody said, why don't you post a description to Gif in the following tweet? Well, sometimes when you're in a chat, there may be quite a few messages in between your original tweet and a following one. So that's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
So the question was, somebody posted an example with where we're using emojis as bullets, basically.
Oh, I see.
So if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see the question there.
Yep, I see that. I see that. Yeah. So again, emojis come with their own descriptions, and you can go on Emojipedia to see exactly what will be said. So for example, the screen reader might say, right arrow, 5 choices to extraordinary productivity, 2 people, head, silhouettes, learn tips and tools. So it's technically it's accessible, but it may not make much sense to somebody that's using a screen reader. So it's I wouldn't recommend it, but I know that it sometimes, that's visually it's different. It stands out from the rest of the text, for sure. That's a great question. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's why I like to use bit.ly as a link shortener, but any link shortener will do, but it just saves on characters. It saves a screen reader having to read through all of those. Another good practice is to put your links and any extra hashtags that you aren't using in the middle of your tweets or posts at the very end. So somebody who is using a screen reader can they hear the URL start and they can stop the screen reader right there because they know that nothing more important is coming after that. I've seen a lot of people put hashtags at the beginnings of their tweets or their posts, and that can get a little tedious for somebody using a screen reader, even for somebody who's sighted, because I'm like, well, what are you going to talk about? What are you saying? What are you saying? Because you've got 10 hashtags there. It's also good to make sure that you're not using too many hashtags. So I tend to be pretty sparing, use hashtags pretty sparingly. I try not to use more than 3 in a single post, just because it starts to look like spam. And it starts to look, it's harder to read when you have all those hashtags and people mentions. But this is an example of a tweet that I wrote to an article that Joni Degner wrote on culturally accessible classrooms. So yeah, check out that article too, it's great. Here's a question, is there a specific way to write alt text? So one of the resources that I always go to for writing alt text, first of all, the Diagram Center, which I have a link on the digital handout, is a great resource for learning to write alt text. WebAIM also has fantastic resources on writing alt text. Alt text is really about the purpose of the image. So it's, you don't have to describe every single thing in the image as long as you get the purpose of it. So for example, for this image, I would write, a group of students sitting on the ground, quote, giving your students opportunities to tell their stories allows them to make connections with one another, end quote, Joni Degner, UDL facilitator. And then the Brooks Publishing URL. Because it's not necessarily important that one of the students is pointing to a laptop and one of the students is wearing red pants and one of them, has white shoes. That's not as important as the fact that it's a photo of students working together. So that would be my advice for, and yes, any text in the image has to be included in the alt text. That is absolutely true, Louise. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that trend of taking a screenshot of a giant long body of text to increase the characters in your tweet. That's not my favorite thing that people do on social media. All right, so we have gone through all of my tips for making your social media more accessible. So we talked about plain language, we talked about Camel Case hashtags, we talked about image descriptions, we talked about captioning and audio, and we talked about link shorteners. So, are there any more questions? Did I miss any questions in the chat that we haven't answered?
I think we've gotten to all the questions that have been in the chat.
Excellent.
This is the easiest job of moderating I've ever had, Mindy. You've been answering all the questions as we went along. So I'm happy to moderate for you anytime.
Excellent, excellent, good to know.
So we do have one question that just came in. Everyone, if you have any other questions, this is the time to do that. We have plenty of time. So the question is,
and I can go back to any part too if there needs if I need to.
do you have any recommendations for social media managers? She mentioned a couple of examples.
Yep.
Hootsuite or Buffer that allow you to use alt text easily.
So actually both of those, that's a great question, because I use about 4 social media managers with all the accounts that I run. I actually like both Hootsuite and Buffer because both of them allow you to use alt text now. So yeah, all of the major social media managers should allow you to use alt text. Even something like TweetDeck, which is just for Twitter, will allow you to add alt text. So Twitter has opened up their API to allow more platforms to add alt text. One of the things that I found, though, however, is that for videos, you really need to do a native upload. So you really need, if you're uploading to Facebook, you really need to go to Facebook to add your captions. And yes, Buffer doesn't work for Facebook. Unfortunately, Facebook hasn't opened up that API because it's related to their artificial intelligence. So that's why they don't allow third-party applications to add their alt text. So for Facebook and Instagram for Facebook and Instagram, you actually need to go to the platform itself to do the alt text. But Twitter has, like I said, you can do it from Buffer, you can do it from Hootsuite, you can do it from TweetDeck. So I use Hootsuite, I use Buffer, I use TweetDeck, and I use, what's that other one that I use? I'll find it.
Well, while you think about that, if you ever wonder how is it that Mindy can tweet while she's presenting at the same time at conferences, that's how she does it. She uses one of these social media managers because in many of them you can schedule your tweets ahead of time.
That's exactly right. I was tweeting during this presentation as well. I think I'm still tweeting right now because I set them up ahead of time because I've had a pretty good idea of where I would be in the webinar. So yeah, I can't think of the other. It's Tweetbot. Tweetbot is the other. Sorry. So I'm the other social media. That's the other third-party one that I use.
There's a question that just came in. I think it's from Louis. I can't see all the names because my window is so small here. Is there a good place or site for people to go in order to hear examples of a screen reader? Because if someone hasn't experienced it, they have no real clue.
That is very, very true. So Luis, I bet you can answer that question.
Yeah, and you can actually just say a few jokes or dance while I get a link. I'll get a link right away because
Luis is going to find that link because I'm sure he has a bunch of recommendations for that. But Luis has shared with Cast here during a couple of staff meetings one of the screen readers that he uses, and I tell you, it's completely eye-opening when you read through a document that hasn't had the accessibility components. It's really eye-opening and ear-opening when you hear what a mess it can be. But yes, most platforms like Mac OS and Windows have built-in screen readers, but they don't necessarily read the alt text of images. It depends on the application that you're using. So there's usually another screen reader that people with visual impairments often use.
So the link I'm going to share, I know we have a screen reader demo. There's a section of our website called Designing for Accessibility with Poor. And at the moment, I'm not coming up with the exact place where that is, but we have a number of screen reader demos in that section of our website.
Yep.
So I'm just going to type it in and then include the link.
Great.
And also, you can do a search on YouTube for something like VoiceOver, which is the built-in screen reader on the Mac, or somebody mentioned NVDA, which stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. Michelle just posted a great list there.
Great list right there.
Some of the built-in ones, like Chromebox on a Chromebook. So a lot of these platforms have a built-in, screen reader that you can experiment with. And like Mindy said, it can be eye-opening sometimes for people that haven't heard it before.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And I see the link for our tour section of the website is there.
Yep.
So
Leslie got that out, so that's great. And there's NVIDIA. And Luis, you're getting a request for your YouTube channel.
Oh yeah. Wait, how did I not think of that? If you go to my YouTube channel, I have all kinds of screen reader demos. I'll try to get that for
He's got a lot of great resources on his YouTube channel, and all of his videos are captioned, so it's a great resource for videos that you can feel good about sending out to your followers.
Yep, I will post it right now in the chat. So I know there is a demo of VoiceOver on an iPad in that link.
Great. Fantastic. Right. Great. You guys are your own best resources. I'm getting resources looking at the chat here. You all have great resources.
Yeah.
You know more than me.
And somebody mentioned TalkBack as well. So if you have a Google phone, that's very similar to the VoiceOver screen reader that ships on iOS devices.
Yep.
And those are great because I found that it's easier to work with screen reader, at least for me, on mobile devices using a few simple gestures than it is on a desktop. That's Absolutely. Just me.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. We have about 4 minutes left. So this is your chance. If you have any last minute questions, get them in and we'll be happy.
I'm at your disposal for the next 4 minutes. So
if there's anything that we covered during the webinar that wasn't clear or that you have a question for Mindy, she'll be happy to help you out with that.
Absolutely. I'm glad it was helpful. Yeah, so the biggest takeaway, how long does it take to catch? That's a great question. It kind of depends. It depends on the, if you start with the auto transcription, which you need to wait a little while for YouTube to do it automatically, and then to go in to change it. But for a 10-minute video, it really should take you longer than probably half an hour tops if you start with the transcript that YouTube will automatically cover.
And I would also recommend if you can start the video with a transcript from the beginning. So as part of the video production process, you start with a transcript. That's going to make the production of the video easier anyway, but it's also going to help with, you can actually upload the transcript to YouTube and then just have YouTube do the timing.
Yep. And that's a great system too. So rev.com does transcription. There's a ton of great transcription services out there. 3Play Media does it. Captions Sync. There's so if you've got a long video, it's really not too expensive to get that transcribed, which is what we do here at CAST. We have live captions, which Mike is doing right now. Thank you so much, Mike, for doing that. But we also send our videos, our webinars out to be captioned, because live captions and closed captions are very, very different things.
Let's see, we have a couple of questions that just came in.
Yes.
So let me see if I can scroll up here. I know I just saw one pop up.
Go ahead.
Do both YouTube and Vimeo support audio description tracks? I know they both support captions in the right format, but
unfortunately, audio description is it's unfortunately kind of in its infancy, even though it's been around for a while on the video platforms. So even on YouTube, there's not a separate track. It's actually a separate video that you have to upload with the audio description. So that's one way to do it on both of those platforms.
What I've seen is a lot of companies that do share videos with audio descriptions, they'll link to two versions of the video. for now. So there'll be a YouTube version that has the audio description and one that doesn't, and then they just link to the two.
Yep. And like I said, I got to give another shout out to 3Play Media because they actually do audio descriptions. So you can send your video to them and they will do it for you for a cost, of course. But that's another service that that they provide, and they just started doing that about a year ago, I think. And it's a great, you know, it gives you ideas for how to do it for other people in the future. It's great.
Last suggestion that I have here is, especially for social media videos, because they tend to be short videos. If you have, there's a number of apps out there that can actually use voice recognition.
Yes.
So as you're recording the video, they're not closed captions technically, they're open captions, but still it's better than not having anything. And you can actually edit the the text for the captions before you upload the video. So Clips, which is a free app for iOS, and then I believe there's one also called Clip-O-Matic. They both recognize your voice and then create those the text for the captions, the open captions.
Yeah, that's great.
So we are just at time. Unfortunately, the hour goes by quickly, just like it does on social media.
It does.
So I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Mindy. That was a great presentation with lots of excellent resources, lots of tips. Really appreciated how well you moderated the chat, which make my job easy. And I also want to thank Mike for providing the captioning services today. And as always, Leslie, for keeping the chat populated with all the links to all the resources that were shared. This webinar has been recorded. So again, in about a week, you'll be able to go to the AIM Center website to the same page where you registered for the webinar, and then you'll be able to access the recording there. And it will include closed captions. There's also a short survey. Leslie just put in the link in the chat. We would appreciate it if you could complete the survey and give us some feedback on this webinar. So that concludes this webinar on social media accessibility. Thank you so much, everybody, and we hope to see you on a future one.